The Council on Foreign Relations sounds like an ordinary committee in Congress, but the CFR is actually a private organization whose foreign policy recommendations are practically marching orders for the many elite politicians who belong to it. The Council was founded in 1921 in Manhattan by Colonel Edward Mandell House, who was Woodrow Wilson's chief advisor, along with Paul Warburg, who was at the secret Jekyll Island meeting held to create the Federal Reserve Bank, along with Elihu Root, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who was the Secretary of War under both President McKinley and Roosevelt, and a handful of other insiders who then received funding for their venture from the Rockefeller family. This organization has its fingerprints on nearly every wrong move our country makes regarding international relations. For example, they were a major force behind the push to launch the war in Iraq, which was based on the fraud, a conspiracy theory really, that Saddam Hussein was close to building nuclear weapons so he could supposedly attack Israel or the United States, claims that the world would later come to learn were completely false, just like the reasons America gets into most wars, like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, a false flag that got us into the Vietnam War, or the USS Maine incident, which sparked the Spanish-American War, but false flags are a topic for a whole other video. Google Operation Northwoods. It was at a Council on Foreign Relations event where Joe Biden bragged about withholding aid from Ukraine unless they fired the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma, the gas company that his son Hunter was getting paid $80,000 a month from. Old Joe was among globalist friends, and he forgot that there were cameras there, so he felt comfortable talking about how he strong-armed them to protect his son.
I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
Hillary Clinton also speaks very frankly when she's with her ruling class friends at the Council on Foreign Relations at an event celebrating their newly opened office in Washington, D.C. years ago. She told them this.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have this far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
Oh, it's where politicians go to be told what they should be doing. Don't bother listening to your constituents. What does the deep state want our politicians to do? Aside from most high-powered political figures being members of the council, many mainstream journalists are members as well and use their positions to promote the agenda of the CFR. This organization, which again sounds like another boring congressional committee, has been the driving force and inspiration behind much of America's foreign policy and operates as a consensus building and lobbying firm to persuade politicians and members of the media to carry out their directives. Richard Haas, who's been the president of the CFR for almost 20 years now, appeared on Bill Maher's HBO show like 10 years ago now to promote his book, and this is how the interview began.
He is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of War of Necessity, War of Choice. Richard Haas has come back to talk to us. Okay, so as we discussed last time, you are the president of the Council of Foreign Relations, which secretly controls the world, I believe.
Look at him sitting there grinning ear to ear and nodding his head in agreement as the audience laughs, completely clueless. They think the CFR is just another congressional committee. A guy named Robert Pastor, who was a high-level member of the Council on Foreign Relations and considered the father of the concept for the North American Union, wrote a book in 2001 titled Towards a North American Community, where he said that the United States, Canada, and Mexico should merge into a regional union modeled after the European Union and then replace our respective currencies with a new one called the Amero. The globalists' ultimate plan for currencies is to first establish regional unions and regional currencies around the world, and then merge all of them into one unified global currency, potentially called the Phoenix, since it symbolically rose up out of the ashes of the other dead currencies, which will be a centralized digital currency controlled by the private banking cartel. Once physical currency like cash and coins have been eliminated or made nearly impossible to use, the unified centralized cryptocurrency will be the global standard controlled by the World Bank and its affiliates. Of course, some people think that the new global currency will be Bitcoin, but probably not, because that's a decentralized cryptocurrency, which actually is terrible as a currency because it's so expensive for small transactions and is more of a digital asset, or supposedly a digital gold, as some say, but that's a topic for a whole other video. Not to mention, governments like currencies that they can inflate. They like fiat currencies so that they can create money out of nothing, which Bitcoin wouldn't allow because its supply is capped. There are other problems with it as well, like its value being too unstable to use as a reliable medium of exchange to price goods and services, and it has utterly failed to function as a safe haven asset or a store of value over the last year, despite inflation skyrocketing. The government will probably outlaw self-custody Bitcoin wallets at some point. Not to mention, spending Bitcoin or any crypto to buy things forces you to incur a capital gains tax every time you use them, which is not just an accounting nightmare, but dramatically reduces the purchasing power of any crypto, because instead of having to just pay sales tax on every transaction, you have to pay capital gains tax, which can be just as high as income tax. And if you don't think that the IRS is watching the blockchain, then someday you'll be sadly mistaken. The whole idea of a global digital currency and a cashless society opens up another gigantic can of worms, though, regarding the fulfillment of the mysterious mark of the beast prophecy, which was written about over 2,000 years ago in the Bible's book of Revelations, which warned that nobody will be able to buy or sell anything without the mark of the beast. And as I'm sure you're aware, cash is being slowly phased out, with many people not even using credit or debit cards now, but their smartphones with Apple Pay and Android Pay instead. And using cash at all now is seen as suspicious because it can't be easily traced and keeps one's purchasing history private. But the convenience of a cashless society has caused most in Generation Z and the millennials to never go to ATMs or withdraw cash, and they don't even carry a single dollar on them when they leave the house. That's too old-fashioned for them. That's like buying a VHS tape to them. Anyway, now we're starting to go down the whole other rabbit hole, but if you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, you should really read my books, because they're a lot more in-depth and serious than my videos, and they're fully sourced with hundreds of footnotes and contain a lot of information that I don't really get into in my videos here. So order the liberal media industrial complex or Hollywood propaganda, how TV, movies, and music shape our culture, in paperback from Amazon.com, or download the ebooks from Kindle, iBooks, Nook, or Google Play. And of course, there's a link to the Amazon listings in the description below. So head on over to Amazon.com or click the links in the description below and check them out.